Um, but the nature of our mind is very pure, like water. We could imagine it's like water. But the defilements or the negative states of mind are like a pollution or a dirt, like sediment that we can put into the water, but it can be removed from the water. So that's a unique feature, I think, of the Buddhist tradition, that there's this focus on what is the mind, how does it function, how can we get the best use out of our mind. So whether a person ever has any interest of going further with the Buddhist tradition, I think there's a lot that anyone of any tradition can learn about to help them become a better individual. I mean, isn't that what all religions are about anyway? I mean, there's some commonalities in all religions, that there are techniques for helping us to increase our positive, good human values, like being more loving. Don't you love the way Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself? If only I could do that, you know? If only I could do that consistently. It's our potential to be able to do that. And, you know, each of us have to check for ourselves, well, to what degree have I been able to accomplish that? To what degree am I even working to accomplish that? I think that's, for me, that's a fair question. So let me come back to, where was I? We were in high school, and then I went to college, and then I was in Seattle, that's right, and I started Vipassana. Okay, so at some point then, I recognized that, you know, I felt like I could see that while I was doing the breathing meditation, I was creating a very peaceful state of mind, but in actuality I wasn't getting rid of those negative states of mind, I was just suppressing them. And so that's a benefit of doing breathing meditation, is that it can suppress and reduce the negative states of mind, the afflictive states of mind, but it doesn't get rid of them. And so I started looking around again, and I that's when I got introduced to Mahayana Buddhism, and particularly the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. All of Buddhism came from India, but of course when people began benefiting from these different traditions, then it spread to different countries. It made its way over the Himalayas into Tibet, and so that's the tradition that I became involved with. And what I appreciate about that tradition is that not only do they encourage this what's called placement meditation, like the breathing, or maybe some of you've done some walking meditation, where you're really limiting your awareness to a certain field, and that does have such a powerful impact on our minds. But in addition to that, the real mainstay, I think, of the Tibetan tradition is doing what's called analytic meditation, where we're actually using our thoughts to investigate and to question why we're thinking what we're thinking, and is our thinking going to bring us the kind of results that we want. So I hate to break it to you, but just because you think something doesn't mean it's true. Have you noticed? And have you noticed that a lot of what we think, actually, if we check up, we'll find it's actually disturbing our mind. You know, like again, I asked you earlier, how many of you know how to worry? Aren't we taking one object to mind again and again and again, as if we're going to get a different result, right? If we think about it enough times. That's an indication that there are certain states of mind that disturb our mind. That's why we call them disturbing emotions or afflictions. They afflict our mind when we allow them to be present in our mind. So there are different ways of analyzing these different states of mind to see, is this an afflictive state of mind? Is this going to bring me the benefit I think it's going to? Or is this maybe not such a positive state of mind? I want to do something, I want to see the detriment or the disadvantages of engaging in that way of thinking so that I can turn away from it. And also, there must be, for every afflictive state of mind, there's an opposing positive state of mind that helps us to develop the opposite of that. I love that aspect. So all of us are a mixture, aren't we? I would say that all of us are a mixture. We have positive states of mind. We have moments where we're just saintly, aren't we? We can be very loving, very generous, kind, compassionate, and then we have those other moments that we don't like to talk about, right? And, you know, one thing I really appreciate about Buddha Shakyamuni is that he was very much a realist. And he basically said, let's look into these ways that we're thinking and see, do they accord with reality? Because that's what it really comes back to. Do these states of mind accord with reality? So, let's see, where was I? I was back in Seattle. I found this tradition to be very helpful for myself. I started getting involved with doing different analytic meditations. There are many, many different analytic meditations that we can do to help us be more aligned with reality. Probably we're not even aware that a lot of our thoughts are not in accord with reality. Like, for instance, if I asked all of you in this room, are you permanent? It wouldn't take too long for us to think about, well, wait a minute, I was born. I've changed a lot since I was born. I'm continually changing. I can see that in the mirror. So I'm impermanent. I'm constantly changing. But notice, if someone were to criticize you or to scare you or to do something to bring a strong emotion, if we were to check in that moment, instead of looking at the external stimulus, if we were to really check inside and see how we're thinking about ourselves in that moment, we'd find that we're thinking of ourselves as being permanent. It's interesting. We're thinking of ourselves as being solid, fixed, independent, completely independent of any other causes and conditions. But unless we're encouraged to investigate how we're thinking, we'll never even recognize that. We'll never even notice that we're out of touch with reality. So I was introduced to Mahayana Buddhism with a wonderful teacher named Thupten Chodron. She's been a Buddhist nun for over 35 years, and she's got a center now in a little tiny town called Newport near Spokane, Washington. And so for 5 years I was there studying with her, taking teachings, listening, trying to practice. I mean, that's the hard part, isn't it? Because what I find is that a lot of Buddhism is not actually rocket science, but that doesn't mean it's easy to practice. There's this gap between what we know and what we do when we get stressed. Have you noticed? Like, probably there's not a person in this room who doesn't have a strong conviction that anger is a negative state of mind. There's been so much. Don't you love it now? We live in a time and age where science is corroborating all these things that spiritual teachers have been telling us forever. So there are a plethora of studies that show that anger is bad for us. It's bad for our immune system, it's bad for our health, it's bad for our emotions, it's bad for our relationships. There's no question about that. I won't ask how many of you still indulge in anger. You see, there's a gap between what we know intellectually and what we're able to integrate. And so this is our challenge. This is our challenge as spiritual seekers, I think, is to integrate whatever tradition we're involved with, to really embody that. Easier said than done, isn't it? So there was a period of time where I think we were on a retreat with Thupten Chodron, and we were doing a purification practice. Every year around New Year's, we do a purification retreat for 4 or 5 days. And it's a beautiful practice to indulge in for a period of days on end, where you're just really trying to generate strong regret for any negativities you've created in the past year and wanting to create positive states of mind. And it was such a blissful experience, a very binding kind of experience with this group of friends. And so we asked Venerable Chodron, could we do this for a longer period of time, like maybe 2 weeks or a month? We could go away and rent some place and do this for a month. And she said, well, typically this retreat is done for 3 months. And so we all kind of gulped and thought, well, could we arrange our lives to actually go away and do a 3-month retreat? And so sure enough, there were 13 of us that organized our lives. This was in 1998. We rented a place near Whistler, BC, a beautiful place it was on the edge of a national forest, so it was really peaceful, really quiet. We went up in September, and we came back in December. And every day we would do 4 sessions of this particular purification practice. It's called Vajrasattva practice. And it was a real life-changing event for me. When you sit and look at your mind for 3 months, you know there's a bit of work to do. You might think, well, got it done, but no, that was just the tip of the iceberg, actually. So if you think about it, all day long we're thinking, we're creating thoughts. Those thoughts are, I'll tell you a quote that I really like. It's from the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. He said, watch your thoughts, they become your speech. Watch your speech, it becomes your action. Watch your actions, it becomes your habit. Watch your habit, it becomes your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. And so it's very much like that. And so very seldomly do we have opportunities where we take time out to sit and reflect for any period of time and really see, what are the habits of my mind or my heart or my soul, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter. But who am I? I mean, that's the age-old question, isn't it? Who am I? How did I get here? How did I get to be this? Why do I think this way? Why do I have these experiences? So in that 3-month period of time, I had a chance to really take a deep look into my mind. And it was a few months after that retreat that I noticed I started having these thoughts of, I think I want to ordain. I think I want to do this full time. I don't want to just squeeze it in, between visiting the in-laws and, going on vacation. I wanted to really make this my life. So not all Buddhists ordain. That's there are lots of lay Buddhists out there who can do the practices as described by the Buddha. But just like other traditions, there are people who decide to, feel a calling, a vocation. They feel a calling to devote themselves to the development of these spiritual practices. And for whatever reason, I had that deep interest. I remember as a young girl, I was, my mom was a nurse at a Catholic hospital, and one day we went to visit. I don't know what we were doing there, but I remember seeing this beautiful Catholic nun with the big white habit, that used to come out like this, getting off, and she floated out of the elevator. And I remember thinking, ooh, I want to be like her. So again, from a Buddhist point of view, if you think about the law of cause and effect, that, we're more than just this 100-year period, at the most, that rather we're a continuity of mind that has come from previous lives, is experiencing life through this body, and at some point will exit from this body and continue on to have other experiences, then it makes sense why children have different propensities. Why some little children go around and stomp on all the ants on the sidewalk, and other little children go around and protect all the ants on the sidewalk. Like, where does that come from? How do you explain that? Only a certain degree of that can be explained in terms of genetics or, genetics. But then, you can even ask the question, well, why is it that a certain mind stream connected with that particular combination of genes or those particular parents? So there's a lot that I find gets explained in the Buddhist tradition. I remember hearing one rather radical teacher say, those who believe in a creator God really need to explain why they're suffering. And those who don't believe in a creator God need to explain everything. And that's my experience of what the Buddhist tradition actually does. It seems like there's a certain amount of matter that's just here, a certain amount of matter, that gets involved in things like big bangs. And there's a certain number of mind streams. And there's a combination of these mind streams and the karmic actions that those people are creating, or those living beings are creating, that influences how this matter gets arranged. So often people ask, well, why me? We ask why me when negative things happen. But we could just as easily ask why me when positive things happen, because they're all results. I mean, think about it. They're all results. Every impermanent thing is a result of something. It's a result of a cause. Every impermanent thing. And not just any old cause, not just random causes, but compatible causes. So the fact that we're humans, the fact that we live in such an amazing country, the fact that we can go down to Reese's and buy whatever we like, the fact that we can turn on our faucet and get clean water, that's amazing results. We can pat ourselves on the back. We've been busy doing some good things in previous lives. I mean, if you follow that line of thinking. But we're exhausting a lot of those results right now by experiencing them. So are we creating, I mean, again, this is a Buddhist point of view, are we creating causes for our future lives? Because what we're doing right now is setting up what we'll experience in the future, whether you think about just the future of this life or even the future, you know, in terms of future lives. This is particularly important to us when we think about our own happiness and the suffering that we experience. This is really why it's important to each one of us to look into and to begin to understand, to investigate how our mind works. Because all of us want to be happy, right? There's not a person here who doesn't want to be happy. And all of us have the same right to be happy. It's not like some people have more right than others. We all have an equal right to be happy. We also have an equal right to be free of suffering. Well, guess what? Happiness and suffering are results. They're impermanent, aren't they? Unfortunately for us, they're impermanent. These different experiences that we have of happiness, well, if it's impermanent, that means it's got a cause. And not just a random cause, but something that's going to be compatible with that experience of happiness. So if you think about that, there must, and if we think about happiness being a mental experience, then there would have to be a previous mental experience that was of a similar type that created that. Now, there might be external conditions that also contribute to our happiness. There's no doubt about that. A nice piece of pumpkin chiffon pie is very nice. Any of you have pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving? But is something material able to bring about a mental state, a state of mind? Could something material actually transform into a mental state? From a Buddhist point of view, they say no. Actually, that's not possible. Something that caused that experience of happiness had to have been similar, of a similar type. So this is why there's such an emphasis within the Buddhist tradition to cultivate positive states of mind, like loving kindness, like compassion, like patience, all the things that are really, they're good human values, aren't they? That no religion has a corner on the market of positive human values. It's something that's, I think, universal. But in the Tibetan tradition, one thing I appreciate is that there are very straightforward techniques that any person, no matter what their religion or tradition is, that any person can take on board and use to cultivate more consistent positive states of mind. Now again, it's humbling. It doesn't happen overnight, I can assure you. It's very humbling work. It's humbling work to be practicing this for, I don't know, maybe 20 years now and still find that I get angry from time to time. But I can assure you, if I hadn't seen some progress, I wouldn't have stayed with it. So the interesting thing is that it's possible to get to the point, because of the very nature of our mind, it's possible to get to the point where anger doesn't arise again. Imagine, just feel into that. Just imagine that for yourself. Now, probably none of you are raging angeraholics, but just imagine if you knew with confidence that you'd never get angry again. Can you feel a bit of relaxation that comes with that kind of thought? Do you think your life would be very different? You all don't get angry, I know. I can tell. You're a different breed of people. But can you imagine if you had trained your mind? I mean, this is the interesting thing. Our mind is like a muscle, and we can train it. If we were to, at least the younger people in the room, if we got determined to run a marathon, we could go out, well, you could go out and do that. I think I'm beyond my marathon days, but you know, if a person trained physically, they could develop a certain capacity to endure, like running a marathon. But if you then ran that marathon and then you stopped training and stopped developing those muscles, we would lose the capacity of those muscles. So that's the physical body. The mental muscle that we all have, the mind, is different. The Buddha described that mental muscle can be developed in positive ways to the point where you no longer lose those positive states of mind. When a person becomes so familiar with those positive states of mind, imagine having a lasting state of loving kindness. Imagine walking through your entire life. Maybe some of you do. Okay, I don't want to shortchange anybody. I don't. Imagine if we walked through our entire life with the constant wish for others to have happiness and the causes of happiness. Can you imagine waking up next to your partner saying, "Good morning, honey. I hope you have happiness today and all the causes of happiness." Is that what you say in the morning? So I'm just throwing out some ideas here, some of the main points that have really meant something to me and have been things that I've been trying to practice, trying to explore. One of the things that I appreciate about this tradition is that the Buddha said, don't believe something just because I said it. He said, you test it. He said, you test it like a gold analyst tests gold. So I guess in the old days when you were exchanging gold with people, you'd cut it and rub it and put it through fire to make sure it was pure. And so this is the same with any of these Buddhist teachings. He said, you take them, you try them on, you test them, see if they work for you. If they work for you, keep them, keep using them. If they don't work for you, set them aside. That's okay. And I think this is why Buddhism is a very popular tradition. I'll call it a tradition rather than a religion. It's a popular philosophy or tradition in this day and age because it sits comfortably with our training in science, doesn't it? Actually, I think Buddhism is very scientific. Like, for instance, what I've been describing in terms of the mind, cause and effect. Really what we're talking about is cause and effect. And this is something that we can verify through our own experience. We can test it out for ourselves. Usually, okay, before I go any further, let me just stop for a moment. I think I've covered some things about myself and a few things about Buddhism. Do you have any questions or comments about anything I've said so far? And I'll have a drink of water.